In the hush of Japan's snow country, villagers breathe with a measured rhythm, plumes of steam from old hot springs drifting like pale lanterns, thatched roofs wearing their snowy crowns, and narrow shovel paths winding between homes like soft, hand-drawn lines. Tonight, let's wander there together. You don't have to keep track of anything. Just listen and imagine your breath pacing itself with the slow fall of snow. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever sleep feels far away. For now, sink into the warmth and let the winter carry you. The village looks as though it was designed by patience. Each Kayabuki roof, thick thatch laid in careful courses, sits at an angle that seems to understand winter personally. The slope is steep but not hurried, like a bow to the season rather than a fight against it. Snow arrives and settles, then slides, and then settles again. The roof invites what it can carry, and politely lets go of what it can't. Somewhere between the softened ridgeline and the eaves trimmed with icicles, you sense the quiet geometry at work, lines, angles, and the slow arithmetic of weight. Thatch is a language of bundles, reed upon reed, straw upon straw, bound into a surface that breathes. In summer, that breath is cool. In winter, it's a sheltering warmth, the many layers trapping a gentle pocket of air. Up close, you can see how the edges are trimmed and combed, how the ridge is capped and lashed, how 1,000 individual stalks choose, together, to keep snow and wind out. If you run your eyes along the slope, you might notice tiny shifts in texture where repairs were made in autumn, a patch that looks almost like a brushstroke in a painting. The craft lives in its maintenance as much as its making. Night in the snow country arrives like a muffled bell. You notice it not by darkness first, but by quiet, a hush that deepens around the houses. Footsteps sink slightly into the pathways cut by shovels earlier in the day. Those paths are narrow and practical, connecting the front doors like threads in a loom, house to bathhouse, house to storehouse, house to onsen, so that life can continue in simple lines even when the fields and hills have become depthless white. Shoveling is not a task to defeat winter, but a way to draw temporary corridors through it. In the morning, someone will redraw the line. In the afternoon, someone will redraw it again. The path is always new, always familiar. Steam drifts from a wooden eave where the onsen water runs warm. It carries the mineral scent of rock and thyme, and the soft hiss of heat meeting cold. There is a rhythm to the village. Soak, cool, rest. Shovel, sip tea, cook rice. Fold quilts, carry firewood, press pickles. In a kitchen lit with low light, rice finishes with a breathy sigh beneath its lid, and pickles, carrion to the eye, bright and simple, wait in their jars. The crunch is a small summer preserved for winter nights. Rice and pickles, a pairing that is not about luxury, but about balance, a quietness you can taste. Back outside, the Kayabuki roofs sit like calm guardians. You might imagine the hands that learned exactly how to tie the reed, how to angle the thatch so snow releases but wind stays outside. The roof becomes a teacher that outlives its students, showing the next set of hands where the ridge must be renewed, how the layers must overlap, how the drip line should land. Even the snow itself seems to respect this craft. When it slips free, it does so in gentle sheets, tumbling to the ground with a soft thump that's almost a heartbeat. And the roof emerges again in its straw-brown confidence. Paths are trimmed again after dinner, when the sky is the color of deepest ink. There's something ceremonial about the way a shovel scrapes, then lifts, then sets aside the fresh fall. Simple movements repeated until you forget you are moving at all. In the distance, an onsen bathhouse window glows like the center of a lantern. Inside, steam gathers on the ceiling, and someone's shoulders sink lower and lower until the heat has drawn winter out of their bones. The sound of water, steady and uncomplicated, is a lullaby that predates every house in this village. Meanwhile, rice bowls are carried to low tables. Pickles, daikon, plum, cucumber, offer notes that are bright and sharp, as if they've kept a memory of the growing season and now return it in small, welcome flashes. The tableware clicks softly, lacquer on wood, and tea sends up a curl of warmth you can smell even from the doorway. The meal is unremarkable by the measures of celebration, and perfect by the measures of winter. enough warmth to carry you to sleep, enough flavor to remind you that life is gently continuing if you step outside one last time. You might hear snow landing on snow, a sound so subtle it's less than a whisper. The Kayabuki roof has taken on another fine veil, and the world is once more redrawn. Steam meets starlight, and a shovel stands against a gate, ready for morning. The path is there, thin, winding, and certain, waiting to be remade by the first set of footprints. And inside, under the generous slope of straw and reed, blankets hold the day's heat. The house settles. The village breathes. And winter hums softly over everything. The bathhouse door slides with a small wooden sigh, and winter stays politely outside. Inside, the air is thick with steam that smells faintly of minerals and cedar, and your shoulders begin to loosen just by standing still. The Norrin curtain sways back into place, blue cloth settling like a quiet reminder to lower your voice. Shoes are set neatly at the entry. A line of wooden jita rests like a row of commas, each one pausing the snow at the threshold so that the floors remain warm and dry. Every action seems designed to be small and careful, as if the building itself were teaching a lesson in gentleness. There is no rush, not here. Yukata sleeves are folded back without a sound. A woven basket receives your towel and the little things you won't need for a while. Before the bath, there is washing. Before warmth, there is attention. Low stools line the wall like calm little islands, each with a wooden bucket and a tap. You sit, and the ground-level vantage point makes the room feel more spacious and airy, steam rising in slow spirals toward the rafters. A soft splash, a scoop, and water finds your shoulders with a pleasant weight. It's not a chore. It's a welcome, and the body understands. Routines unfold with a deliberate rhythm. Wet the skin, soap, rinse. A gentle brush through the hair, a final clear sluice of water. The bucket has a shallow, rounded voice when it meets the surface, a note you begin to know by heart. People move around you with easy courtesy. No clatter, no hurry, just the occasional murmur, the clink of a bottle, the hush of sponge against skin. There is an etiquette that feels less like rules and more like kindness. Clean before you soak, keep towels out of the water, share the quiet. The room becomes a choir of tiny, considerate sounds dotted to the edge of the main pool. A small basin offers water for Kayabuki, the initial pour. You lift the ladle and let a stream fall slowly over your chest and arms, encouraging your body to meet the heat without surprise. The first step into the bath is a conversation between warmth and winter. The water takes you in, and the muscles, faithful, everyday workers, set down the loads they have been carrying. You feel the weight evaporate as if it were part of the steam itself, drifting upward, becoming sealing fog. Breathing lengthens. The heart measures a different kind of time. The bath is not purely heat. It is also minerals, an older memory dissolved in the water. On some days there's a faint iron tang, on others a soft hint of sulfur, and always the feeling that the earth has offered something drawn from a long distance below. In that offering lives the old practice of TJI, recuperation through repeated soaks, day after day, a slow medicine of patience. Here, healing is not a singular moment but a series of quiet visits. Soak, rest, drink water, sleep, and then repeat. The way snow returns to the roof and the shovel returns to the path. Through a half-open panel. The Roten bureau waits outside, an open-air bath cupped in the winter night. You step from steam to starlight, the cold touching your face like a respectful bow. Snowflakes land on your hair and do not melt at once. They linger, crystalline and light, while the body remains submerged in heat. Nearby, a pine leans under its powdered branches. The soundscape is precise and simple, hot water moving around the stones, a distant drip where eaves meet air, the muttered flutter of a paper lantern in the breeze. In this small landscape, nothing is extra. People share the space without claiming it. A nod replaces a greeting. A shift of position makes room for someone else. The pool holds a gentle geometry, bodies arranged in an unspoken pattern that gives everyone a little view of the night. Time loses minutes. It rises instead in soft layers like steam. You might think of the fields under snow or the path you cleared this morning, but the bath asks nothing, not even your thoughts. Your attention is neither sharp nor dull, just broad and slow, like a river in winter. When you leave the water, the air feels almost new. A towel pats, not rubs. The skin holds warmth like a small lantern under the surface. In the dressing area, a kettle murmurs. You drink barley tea, water, something plain, and feel the heat travel inward, making quiet company with the bath's radiance. Hair is combed. Yukata sleeves fall back into place. The day is lighter by an invisible measure. You understand why people come here after shoveling, after cooking. After long work in cold barns and storehouses, the onsen is where the day exhale happens. And the village breathes out together outside. Snow is steady again. Steam escapes in thin, luminous ribbons and dissolves into the dark. You slip your feet into shoes that have kept a touch of the bath's warmth inside them, and the first steps home feel soft, as if the path itself were grateful. In windows along the lane, you can see small scenes: a kettle lifting its lid, a child yawning into a sleeve, a set of pickles laid out for a late nibble, a broom listening against a wall. The night is ordinary in every perfect way. The bathhouse door closes behind you with its same wooden sigh, and winter resumes its gentle work of quieting the village. Morning arrives like a pale drumbeat on the roof, a slow thud of snow sliding and settling, and the village answers with shovels. Not in a hurry, not in competition, just a measured, neighborly tempo. The first doorway opens, breath fogs the air, and a figure steps out with a shovel whose handle has been smoothed by winters of use. A path isn't merely cleared. It is drawn. One straight stroke for the threshold, one curve to join the lane, a tidy bank along the edges so the wind will skim over rather than refill the trench. The village becomes a small network of white-walled corridors, refreshed daily like pages rewritten by hand. There's a choreography to it, informal but precise. Someone begins near the well, another from the storehouse, another from the bathhouse steps. The lines approach and meet like threads finding each other in a loom. A path that was carved yesterday will be revised today, slightly wider where elders walk, slightly higher where drifts return with stubborn confidence. No one announces the plan, but everyone knows it. Keep the main line open, check on the steeper slopes, sweep the shrine steps, mind the water channels so melt can drain. When a section grows heavy with new snow, an extra pair of hands appears, and the rhythm thickens into a pleasant hush of work. Kayabuki roofs, meanwhile, manage their own partnership with the weather. Their angles invite snow to sit and then release, but even wisdom tires. On certain days, you'll see people with bamboo poles or ropes, coaxing loose the sheets before the weight deepens. Voices are low, movements practiced. A tap, a slide, a soft avalanche to the ground where banks welcome the new layer without complaint. There's even a courtesy about where the snow falls, never onto a neighbor's path, never blocking a gate, always guided into the places that expect it. In winter, conscientiousness is a form of architecture. The tools themselves belong to the season's vocabulary. Shovels of wood and metal, brooms tied with rice straw, a sled for ferrying snow away when the banks reach their limit. Handles are wrapped with cloth where palms prefer warmth. On clear days, someone oils the hinges of a gate that will swing 100 small arcs before spring. Children learn the language early: how to toss snow so it lands soft and doesn't crumble back into the passage, how to carve a gentle slope at each doorway so steps meet path like a handshake. The lesson is simple and vast. A village is lighter when everyone lifts a little. Tea midday, steamy breath from an open pot mingles with the winter light. People pause, tea near a doorway, a rice ball passed from a kitchen, crunchy pickles in a small dish that tastes like preserved sunlight. The body warms from the center, and the work resumes with a lighter gait. Someone calls down the lane, not loudly, just enough, a reminder about the heavy drift by the bridge. A note that the bathhouse eaves are shedding faster than usual. The map of the day updates itself, and the pathwork continues. By afternoon, the corridors are confident, long, bright channels walled by snow that holds its shape like a quiet sculpture. Footsteps tamp the floor to a soft firmness. A sled leaves twin lines that shimmer in low sun. Here and there, a lantern gets daylight tested, wick trimmed, glass wiped, so that evening will bloom without fuss. A broom kisses each threshold. brushing away the feathering flakes that accumulate while no one is looking. The village's edges blur under the white, but its inner lines grow sharper, more intimate, as if winter had pressed the neighborhood into a single, careful sentence. Sometimes the work invites a story. An elder, pausing with a shovel balanced like a walking stick, tells of a year when the snow climbed above the fence posts and the lanes turned into tunnels with blue ceilings. Or of a winter when the onsen never felt hotter, or when a roof was renewed in autumn just in time to face a heavy February. The stories aren't warnings or boasts. They're footnotes to the path you're carving now, proof that repetition is its own kind of wisdom. Evening returns the tools to their places. Shovels lean in pairs by the door, their blades shedding small halos of melting snow. Boots line up to dry, toes pointing toward tomorrow. The paths, though, do not rest. They hold their shape in the night like intentions. A fox may inscribe a light script across the lane, or a drifting veil may settle and soften the edges, but the corridors remain, memory made visible on the ground. Windows grow warm. Steam from the bathhouse threads the dark. The roofs, with their generous shoulders, collect a new layer to consider. The choreography will begin again at first light, and the village will redraw itself, line by patient line. In the deep hush of snow country, the kitchen becomes a slow, bright lantern. Before dawn, a lid lifts, steam escapes in a small, white ribbon, and rice announces itself with a soft, grain-sweet scent. It began long before this moment, the careful washing, the circling of hands in cool water, clouding and clearing, then the patient soak, the measured drain, the steady heat that never rushes. The pot, Donabe earthenware or a blackened kama over a kamadu, keeps a kindly secret, the tender body of the rice and the delicate crust at the edge, a whisper of okoga that tastes like a memory of fire. In a house framed by winter, warmth is not just temperature. It's a practice. Pickles wait nearby, lined like commas in their jars. Daikon turns sunshine yellow, plums wrinkled into bright moons, cucumbers that preserve the crisp syllables of summer. Each is a small archive. The Tsukemino press leans patiently into its work, weight and time collaborating. In a wooden tub, rice bran is stirred into a living bed. Nukazuke, a friendly soil for vegetables that rest and awaken under your hand each day. Your palm learns the texture, warmer in the center than at the rim, faintly fragrant with a toasty note. Fermentation becomes an unhurried companion, neither seen nor rushed, but trusted. Like snow that keeps its promises dot on a shelf, miso sleeps in a crock with a paper lid, salted and serene. It too has learned patience, gathering autumn's beans and summer's koji into a winter story that will be ladled out spoon by spoon. Some crocks hold white miso, gentle, almost shy. Others deepen toward red and brown, speaking softly of long time. When you lift the lid, the scent is round and comforting, like a room you've always known. In the bowl, miso meets hot water, wakame, tofu, scallion, simple company, balanced as footprints along a shoveled path. The soup does for the inside what the bath does for the outside. It convinces the body that winter is a friend. Rice, gohan, is not merely food. It is an organizing principle. Bowls appear as if they were part of the table itself, lacquer shining faintly in lamplight. The first bite is quiet. The second is quieter. Then a pickle, sharp, bright, and suddenly your mouth remembers gardens under sun, the snap of a harvest day, the air moving through leaves. Yumaboshi offers a small thunderclap of sour that wakes the senses and then sits down to behave. Takuan lends a gentle sweetness. Nukazuke returns with the daily intimacy of your own tending. A mouthful of miso follows, and the triangle is complete. Warm, bright, calm outside the window, snow arranges itself in patient layers. The pantry is a counterpoint. Shelves of brown bottles and earthen crocks, baskets tucked into their corners, a measured neatness that feels like a prayer answered. A cane jar wears a cloth cap and a twine bow, its surface dusted with a little flower of thyme. You can hear the faintest sounds of the house, a kettle beginning to think about boiling. A pair of wooden chopsticks taken gently from a drawer. The smallest creak as the thatch above resettles under a new snowfall. The world's loudness has been put away for the season. What remains fits in a bowl and a breath. Sometimes lunch is only rice, pickles, tea, and that is exactly enough. The body understands the point. Steadiness, not spectacle. Nutrition as a kind of story about care. In the late afternoon, another batch of rice is rinsed and left to soak while you sweep the threshold and brush the path's edges. The pot will be ready when the bath ends. Dinner will be ready when the shovels rest. The timing is gentle, like two people walking side by side without speaking. When evening arrives, you set the lids, one on the rice, one on the miso, and the room fills with a modest, generous warmth. Snow country kitchens also keep a quiet technology of winter. A yukamura, a snow-cooled store, or simply a shaded shed, holds crates of vegetables that would rather nap than freeze. Carrots and daikon rest under straw, cabbages nestle like quiet heads, and the cold comforts rather than bites. When you bring a daikon inside, it carries a winter scent, clean and pale. Your knife releases it into the bowl with a crisp, decisive sound that feels like tidying the day. The cutting board, the ladle, the bowl, the jar, each tool knows its place, as every person knows their path through the snow. Be why the time lanterns deepen the corners of the room. Dinner is a calm geography. White rice like a field at sunrise. Miso soup like a small hot spring in a wooden valley. Pickles lined like stepping stones. Tea in a cup the color of late autumn. Conversation is minimal. Breath and steam do the talking. Somewhere in the background, a tsukemino press resumes its slow grammar, and the nukadoko waits for your hand tomorrow. The kitchen closes itself softly, lids snug, cloths folded, kettle emptied to a hush. Outside, the village settles under its straw crowns. Inside, the pantry glows with quiet, edible light. The Kayabuki roof is a winter animal with a summer memory, and the people who tend it speak its language in knots and bundles. Long before snow arrives, fields of tall grasses are cut and dried, combed by hand and gathered into sheaves that rest in airy stacks. Each stalk has a direction it prefers. Each bundle has a right way up. You can tell by the way the tips lie, soft, obedient lines that will one day shed snow like a bird's feathers shed rain. In late autumn, when the air becomes crisp and smellable, the village sets aside days to tune these straw instruments, sorting, trimming, bundling until a soft. Even music sits ready for the rafters. Winter does not end the craft. It clarifies it. On clear, cold mornings, a small crew moves along a roof with ropes looped across the ridge, their feet finding purchase on the straw as if walking the surface of a field. They are quiet in the way concentration is quiet. Short phrases, gloved hands, sleeves flecked with frost. A bundle is placed and aligned. A wooden needle, long as a forearm, guides cord through layers. A knot settles in the palm and becomes invisible inside the thatched body. The work proceeds not bundle by bundle, but breath by breath, a pace that lets the fibers seat themselves and the weight of the new course find its home. Thatch is generous when overlapped correctly. Each layer covers the cut ends of the layer below, like the calm repeat of waves, until the thickness becomes its own kind of weather, a climate of warmth held just above the beams. From the lane, you can't see the stitches. You only see the slope achieve its purposeful angle, a geometry that has argued with winter long enough to turn the argument into a friendship. The ridge line, thick and sure, wears a cap that is less ornament than intention. It seals, it sheds, it lasts. Now and then, a broom made of rice straw combs the surface, encouraging loose chaff to drift away on the light breeze, smoothing the plain so snow will leave in polite sheets rather than clump in stubborn worry below the roof. The house acknowledges the season in 1,000 small ways. Doors slide without protest because their tracks are brushed daily. Transoms are dusted of the soft powder that steals in on cuffs and hems. A length of cloth near the entry receives damp gloves and lets them steam themselves quietly back toward usefulness. The loft, just under the thatch, holds a particular winter scent, clean straw, faint wood smoke, the mineral cool of the season. You can lie still there and hear the roof converse with the snow, a hush when flakes thicken, a ruffle when the wind writes briefly across the slope, a muted thump as a pane of powder releases and meets the bank below. When repairs are needed, they are seldom grand gestures. A handful of bundles, a patient ladder, a morning of careful hands. The old is not discarded. It is reseeded, encouraged, supplemented. A patch becomes a brushstroke. The craft wears its edits proudly because each one records a choice to keep the house warm and the winter welcome. Neighbors notice and drift over in pairs. One steadies the ladder, another ties a line. A third, who has made more roofs than anyone else present, tilts their head once and says, "A little steeper there," and the line on the world corrects itself. A tea midday. Tea breathes into the cold, and the roof crew sits on planks laid across the lower eaves. Cups warm fingers. Rice balls and pickles become punctuation in conversation. Someone tells of a winter when the snow arrived in soft avalanches every afternoon, and they learn to listen for the pre-thump whisper that announces the slide. Someone else remembers the year the ridge was renewed just ahead of a storm, and how the new thatch shed the weight with a confidence that felt like a compliment. The stories are not about pride. They're about continuity, the way a line of knowledge passes across seasons like a path shoveled and reshoveled. Never exactly the same and always exactly itself. Afternoon light makes the straw glow a quiet gold. From the lane, you see the slope become slightly more perfect with each course. The chords cinch down and disappear, becoming intention more than thing. A final combing smooths the surface. A last knot disappears into the thickness where warmth will collect tonight. On the ground, the offcuts and chaff are swept and bagged for kindling or compost. Nothing is wasted because winter asks us to be tidy with our blessings toward evening. The roof offers its first small test. A veil of new snow dusts the fresh work, and you watch as the flakes settle, pile, and, exactly as planned, let go in a soft, unified sheet. The sound is a gentle applause, the house nodding to the hands that tuned it. Inside, the rooms accept the proof without comment. Lacquered bowls appear. The rice lifts its lid with its quiet sigh. Pickles show their bright edges. A kettle speaks in a near whistle and then calms. Overhead, the roof holds the night's patience. By lantern time, tools have gone back to their places. Ropes are coiled. Needles returned to their shelf. The broom leans with the dignity of something that has served a long purpose well. The roof looks both new and eternal, a straw mountain with human fingerprints pressed invisibly through it. Snow resumes its slow authorship of the village. And in bed, under quilts that smell faintly of sun and cedar, you can feel the craft hovering above you like a friendly, watchful animal, breathing, insulating, explaining winter back to itself until you sleep. Inside the snow country house, warmth is written in layers rather than bursts. The first layer is the house itself, thick Kayabuki above, timber bones within, paper screens that glow like calm clouds, where winter can press its hand against a seam. The family has already placed a reply, an extra panel here, a draft stopping roll of cloth there, a sliding storm shutter, a madu, that closes at night with a soft, sealing sound. The interior light becomes honeyed, and the rooms feel smaller in a kind way. Like being cupped in a palm. At the center of one room sits a kotatsu, a low table with a quilted futon draped beneath its rim, and the heat inside is a mild, bright secret. Feet slide under the quilt and discover a small country of warmth, a sunlight that never hurries. A kettle murmurs nearby as if agreeing with everything. The table becomes a geography of winter. Rice bowl, pickles, a book laid face down, a child's slate, a sewing kit with thread like fine winter berries. Conversations are soft. Pauses are long. The quilt is a gentle argument against leaving Dadayan older rooms, and Aurori, sunken half, draws the eye the way a pond draws moonlight. A hooked pole, jizaikaji, carved and blackened by years of smoke, suspends the kettle in exactly the right place, where heat speaks clearly but not loudly. The hearth smoke has risen for decades into the thatch, lending it a preservative kiss and a faint scent of memory. Around the edge, time slows. Hands warmed and stories poured, fish grilled politely, miso warmed until it thinks about a simmer and then is asked to wait. You learn the hearth's moods, how a little more charcoal changes the tone of the evening, how embers become a diary of heat that can be reread in the morning. A hibachi, charcoal brazier, travels like a small sun from room to room, attended by a pair of tongs that click with a sound both delicate and decisive. The brazier doesn't declare itself. It companions you. A grandmother warms her hands over it before sewing. A child hovers palms above it and then returns to writing careful characters. A guest sets their cup near its rim just long enough to coax the chill from tea. The glow is modest, and because it is modest you attend to it, the way you attend to a friend who prefers to whisper. Clothing replies to winter with the same thoughtful layering. A padded Hanton jacket catches the body's heat and keeps it like a promise. Underfoot, tabby with split toes find their way even on polished boards. Straw snow boots and leggings hang neatly to steam out the day's damp. Quilts, futon folded by morning light and unfurled at night, hold a clean, sun-dried scent from those rare clear days when bedding is aired on poles and verandas, a bright ceremony against the long white season. Cotton padding remembers each sleeper and returns that knowledge in warmth. Paper and would carry their own warmth in winter, the tactile warmth of things that accept heat and then speak it back quietly. Shoji screens glow with lamplight like moonlit snow. Fusuma doors slide with a hush that feels like respect. A broom's bristles whisper at the threshold each afternoon, flicking away the day's feathering of powder. The room never tries to be summer. It chooses to be winter well, warm where it matters, tidy where it counts. Bright where the eye rests dot on evenings when the bath has softened everyone's edges. A basket at the kotatsu holds mandarins, peels folding away with a small spritz of brightness into the winter air. Someone mends a cuff. Someone turns a page. Someone leans back and closes their eyes, the hot spring's residual glow meeting the kotatsu's steady warmth halfway. Tea is poured, a second cup for the one who forgot to ask. Beyond the paper, the roof makes its low punctuation, snow slipping and settling, and the house adds a comma with the rustle of quilt. There is a choreography to bed as well. Futons unroll with the gravity of a ritual, quilts spread, pillows tucked, a small hand pats down an edge with unnecessary but satisfying precision. The brazier is settled safely. The kettle on the irori moves off the boil to a listening position. Breath finds a slower meter. Outside, the onsen sends up its nightly proof that warmth rises. Inside, the room collects each small heat, human, charcoal, tea, and arranges them into a grammar of sleep. In this quiet grammar, even silence is articulate. The Kayabuki holds night above you like a careful hand. The kotatsu holds the day's last light. The irori keeps a red thought in its bed of ash. Winter is not expelled. It is invited to sit by the door and behave. You sleep under quilts that remember the sun and wake to rooms that have kept faith with the dark, warm in the exact places warmth is needed and nowhere wasted. The shrine sits slightly above the village, a shoulder of ground where the snow comes first and stays longest. In daylight, the steps are a small, careful achievement, brushed clean each morning by the same pair of hands. The broom is rice straw bound to a cedar handle, and it moves with a particular tenderness, each stroke light but final, respectful of both stone and snow. The path from lane to torii is narrow and definite, a white valley on either side holding the hush of the season. A fox sometimes uses these steps at night, printing delicate triangles that point toward the woods and then away again. The torii gate wears winter lightly. Its beam catches a rim of snow that thins as the sun thinks about appearing. Beneath it, a rope of rice straw, the shimenawa, holds paper streamers that flutter a small grammar of purity into the cold air. Your hands learn a coldness that is not unkind, a coin between fingers, a cord for the bell, palms rubbed once to wake warmth, the soft clap that is more greeting than demand. The bell answers with a round note, and the sound seems to clean the space inside your chest the way the broom cleaned the steps, even in heavy snow. Offerings arrive, not the grand kind, but winter's modest inventory. A pair of mandarin oranges, bright as early lanterns. A small dish of rice, steam still thinking about rising. A strip of pickled daikon folded on a leaf, its yellow a quiet sun against white. The god of small continuities, whoever tends this corner of the world, accepts them with a patience that looks like stillness. A wooden plaque waits for words, and someone writes a wish in careful strokes, for health. 4 warm hands, for roofs that shed their burdens politely, for the lane to stay open to the bathhouse and back. The caretaker knows the season's tempo by heart. In one pocket, a folded cloth to wipe the bell's pull when frost gathers. In another, coarse salt to scatter where steps go slick. A ladder leans behind the hunden for when the eaves grow heavy. The broom rests out of the weather with its bristles off the ground because tools also deserve a little kindness. On quiet afternoons, a ladle clears a niche where meltwater has stalled, sending it down toward the ditch that carries every drop away in a soft, mineral whisper. Ritual and maintenance meet so easily here you forget they were ever separate words. Sometimes a group arrives, neighbors walking together at a pace that belongs to snow. They pause in a small cluster, breath drifting like offerings the air keeps. The bell speaks once, twice. 2 claps return the greeting. A bow lowers the day's shoulders. No announcement follows, no sermon, no spectacle. The shared silence is the point, heartbeats aligning briefly with the rhythm of winter. Afterward, mittens tugged back on, a wool cap settled, a word about the path by the bridge, a laugh that floats like pale smoke and disappears. Festive days draw a little more colour into the white. Red scarves. A child's hat with a pom that bobs like a berry. Paper charms that catch what little sun the season offers. A kettle appears, balanced on a small brazier behind a windbreak, and cups pass hand to hand, thawing fingers one circle at a time. On the first days of the year, the bell's rope becomes polished by many palms. Emma boards fill with winter handwriting, hopes that lean toward warmth, steady work, good harvests when the world softens. The snow listens and adds its own promise. It will leave, but not yet, and in leaving it will feed the hidden places. When the light tilts toward evening, the shrine gathers its edges. A lantern by the gate turns from ornament to purpose. The steps, brushed again, hold their clean lines against a fresh dusting. Somewhere under the Kayabuki of the office, a ledger closes. Somewhere under the priest's sleeves, hands return to warmth. The bell grows quiet, but your ears keep its note for a while, humming it under your breath as you walk back down the lane. The sound seems to match everything else. The shovels scrape far away, the bathwaters murmur in its trough. The tiny creak of thatch making peace with its white companion at the foot of the steps. The village resumes around you, rice almost ready. Pickles set out, steam finding the sky. Paths mended where the afternoon drifted. You look back once. The gate is a black brushstroke against the falling snow. The rope and paper whisper their small, bright syllables. The steps keep the day's promise of safe footing. Winter is full of tasks, but here they turn into gestures. Sweep, bow, ring, breathe. The air is clean with cold, and you carry a quiet that weighs less than a mitten, more than a memory. A garden in snow country does not disappear. It edits itself. Paths narrow to suggestion. Stones become gentle mounds. The pine's dark needles show as careful calligraphy against white paper. Winter arrives not to erase but to underline. Every shape made by summer hands receives a soft, bright annotation. You notice first the ropes. Eucalyptus lines fan outward from tall poles, cradling the branches of pines and plums in a geometry that looks both decorative and deeply practical. The pattern is a star turned to earth, a net of patience. Snow may fall as it wishes. The ropes teach it to share the weight. Each knot has a calm intention. Gardeners set them before the first serious storms. Measuring from memory, how a certain bough sags after the third heavy fall. How a split can begin invisibly. How a spring bloom is saved by winter's foresight. The rope itself is a warm color against the cold, a small mercy to the eye. In morning light, frost feathers along the fibers, and the whole structure seems to breathe. Branch, rope, snow, each giving an inch so that the others can endure. This, too, is a conversation. The pine answers winter with quiet cooperation, and the rope holds the reply. Stone lanterns, Yukimigata, snow viewing lanterns, earn their name now. Snow caps their broad roofs with elegant, exaggerated hats, the edges curving like porcelain. A hollowness beneath the cap, where summer light once sat, holds a pocket of shadow that feels warm by contrast. At dusk, if someone places a candle inside, The lantern glows with a small, steady heart, a patient star low to the ground. Light lands on snow and comes back brighter. The garden becomes a private sky you can walk through, ponds sleep with one eye open. A thin skin of ice sketches itself along the edges where the water is slow, leaving the middle dark and thinking. Carp drift deep where the temperature keeps its promises. At Tsukubai, Stone Basin, wears a tidy round of ice until a ladle's touch makes a clear window. You watch your breath fog and break on the surface. Somewhere, a Shushurodoshi, bamboo water striker, has given up its knock for winter, arrested midbow, a little poem of stillness. Soon, but not now. Even sound has agreed to go softly, paths receive their winter grammar, a single person's width, edged by low crescent banks. The shovel's work here is gentler than in the lane. Less excavation, more calligraphy. Each sweep reveals the top of a stepping stone, the gentle rise of a small bridge, the precise shoulder of a viewing rock. The garden's distances shrink to intimacy. You walk not to cross space, but to greet familiar details under their quiet disguises. A bamboo handrail claims its own little ridge of snow. A white sleeve you brush with your glove as you pass. There is a place to pause where a maple keeps the memory of red in its fine. Empty latticework, and behind it the bamboo grove writes vertical notes into the air. Snow gathers on each slender culm, then tumbles away in lonely commas when a breeze remarks upon the arrangement. The sound is tiny, like beads falling on cloth. You stand still and learn how many small noises winter contains when you do not add your OWNDAT midday. A gardener appears with a wicker basket and a wooden mallet. Not to fix anything, but to greet the day's changes. A rope is tightened by a knot's breadth. A branch is relieved of a stubborn clump with one respectful tap. The snow on a lantern's cap is brushed a fraction so that the curve reads cleanly from the veranda. Here, maintenance is a form of reading. The garden is a text written in seasons, and the gardener is turning the page without breaking the spine. Water moves under everything. A narrow channel, mostly hidden, keeps the pond breathing and the stones dry-footed. Where warm onsen runoff passes near a boundary, willow twigs with the faintest fog like a shawl. You crouch to listen and hear the infrastructure of quiet. Trickle, seep, hush. The garden's beauty is not only what you see. It is the way it continues to function gracefully when no one is watching. Like a well-tended kitchen or a path that clears itself by habit toward evening. Color subtracts itself from the scene until only tones remain. Straw ropes honey pale. Pines almost black, snow luminous and tender. Someone lights the veranda lamp, and the paper screens behind you become a painting about warmth. The garden accepts the light without changing its mind. The ropes hold their lines. The lanterns carry their small suns. The pond keeps its thoughtful dark. A fox prints 2 light notes across the far bank, then edits them with its tail. You feel that winter is less a season than a style of attention. Before you go in, you stand beneath the largest pine and look up into the web of Yukatsuri. It is a handmade constellation at arm's length, a galaxy anchored to wood. Snow dots the rope's crossings like stars. You understand suddenly that protection can be beautiful. Not a cage, but a kindness that lets things keep their shape. You bow, a little, to the tree, to the ropes, to the hands that tied them in weather that stung their knuckles. Then the veranda step admits you, and the house replaces the garden in your eye, and behind you the pines continue their quiet, geometrical conversation with the sky. At the edge of a courtyard where footsteps become soft and definite, a kara, storehouse, stands like a winter sentence written in calm ink. Its white plastered walls hold the day's light even when the sun hides, and the deep eaves wear a fine brim of snow that narrows to a clean line at the drip. The kara's purpose is simple and generous, to keep what should be kept. In winter, that purpose becomes visible the way breath becomes visible. What is usually quiet reveals itself in a small cloud of care. The wall says everything without speaking. Layers of plaster, shikui, rest over a lath of bamboo and wood, lime mingled with memory and air. The surface seems to glow by itself, a steady brightness that winter respects. Snow leaned against it melts slowly and politely, the wall neither hastening nor resisting, just maintaining the exactness of its temperature. Smooth corners discourage weather from finding places to bite. In the right light, you can see the hand of the plasterer, a trowel's faint sweep. The gentlest undulation, signatures of slowness left in a material designed to last. T the doors. Black hardware sits like punctuation, hinges and straps heavy enough to reassure the season. Sometimes there are two layers, an outer wooden shutter that accepts the snow's greeting and an inner, tighter door that keeps the house's private weather tucked in place. Around the edges, a white bead of plaster seals the meeting of wall and frame as if a careful seamstress hemmed the cold out. The latch lowers with a sound that feels older than speech. Inside, the air is its own climate, faintly cool, faintly dry, faintly scented with straw and grain, a middle ground where winter's extremes become moderated into usefulness. Timber bones hold this quiet. Posts and beams meet by joinery that prefers intelligence to nails, mortise and tenon, scarf joints, wedges that remember where they belong. The structure expands and rests with the season like a chest breathing under quilts. You can stand beneath a beam and sense the small accommodations, a whisper of give when wind leans on the eaves, a returning stillness when the snow slides and the weight rearranges. Kara are not fortresses that defy weather. They are instruments tuned to it. Shelves become geography. Rice sacks sit like low hills. Millet and barley make smaller ranges. Jars of miso and pickles line up as if reading themselves. Dark, light, darker, a tidy horizon of lids and cloth caps. Tools sleep upright. Rakes and shovels a small forest. Bamboo baskets nested like birds in winter trees. A paper tag on a string records what memory already knows. But winter likes good manners, and labels are a form of courtesy. Between items, air moves a little, just enough to keep company and prevent the damp from making ambitions. A small window with a wooden shutter admits light only when invited. And even then it seems to arrive on tiptoe. One corner is given to seeds and future plans, packets in wooden drawers, envelopes of rice wrapped in paper, tiny promises tied with string. The Kara's steadiness turns these fragile things into next year's certainty. A ledger sits on a shelf with a pencil laid across it. Not to command, but to remember. How much rice moved to the kitchen this week? How many jars were opened for guests? How many bundles of straw remain for the roof spring combing? Numbers here are quiet, practical footsteps that prevent anyone from getting lost. Sometimes you come simply to listen. The Kara has its own winter soundscape, a distant drip translated into nothing by the eaves. The barest creak when temperature thinks of changing its mind. The plush hush of your footsteps on a swept, slightly dusty floor. If the wind stiffens, you might hear it try the corners and then give up, unconvinced that any mischief could be made here. When snow arrives in a sudden flurry, the roof remarks once, a soft thump of connection, and the walls, white and calm, do not change expression. Holding is not dramatic work. In the afternoon, you fetch what the house will need, a bundle of charcoal, a measure of rice, a jar whose lid yields with a modest pop. You leave an equal neatness behind, lids repacked, sacks retied, a broom passed once in gratitude. The Kara returns to stillness the way water returns to a basin after a ladle's touch. Outside, the lane gathers your footprints into its day-long sentence, and your breath meets the cold with the confidence of someone who remembers where warmth is kept. Kara live in families the way trees live in groves. A neighbour's storehouse shares the same grammar of plaster and timber, but its shelves tell a different story. Barrels forsake mash, coils of rope for yukatsuri, bundles of reed for thatch repairs. The village's capacity to endure winter can be measured, quietly, in these rooms. What they hold, how well they hold it, how thoughtfully their contents flow back into kitchens, baths, roofs, and hands. Commerce may move along the lane, but continuity sleeps in these white-walled boxes of patience. Toward evening, the hardware on the door chills and darkens like a pond at dusk. You set the latch, feeling it settle into its nest. Snow lifts itself into the air again, beginning as a rumor and becoming a fact. The house across the yard glows in paper rectangles. You carry rice and charcoal inside, and the Kara remains, a calm square of redness, until tomorrow asks for something, and it answers by giving, and then rests once more in its clean, useful quiet. Winter gives the house extra time, and the house returns the favor by letting itself be gently remade. A table is cleared near the window where the paper glows like captured daylight. Brushes are set out. A small stone receives water and becomes black, reflective ink. A square of washi waits for the first careful stroke. The air holds two fragrances that agree with each other: rice glue faint and sweet, ink rich and cool. Outside, snow edits the world into a few honest shapes. Inside, you choose the same simplicity. Shoji screens are the winter's friendly lanterns. Their cedar lattices, delicate but sure, hold paper that gathers light and gives it back softened, like snow gives back moon. The season asks for small maintenance. A tear here becomes a lesson in patience. The old paper is moistened along its seams until it sighs and releases. The lattice is brushed. The new sheet is laid with a smooth palm that remembers to breathe. Rice paste trains the edges to behave. When your hand lifts, the screen seems to inhale. Later, the room will glow evenly again, as if someone improved the weather. Washi itself is winter's quiet miracle. Fibers of kozo or mitsumade are cooked and cleaned until only the pure, strong threads remain. Beaten to openness. Floated in a vat where a screen gathers them into a thin, willing cloud. Even long after drying, the paper keeps a memory of water and responds to it politely, tightening slightly when dampened, then shrinking into a drum-smooth surface as it dries. On cold days, you can hear that small tightening sound if you listen for it, like a tiny hand smoothing a sheet. Calligraphy begins when the brush forgets it is a tool and remembers it is a reed that once swayed in wind. The inkstone's first circle is slow. The second admits your breath. The third is simply a fact. A character arrives like footsteps on a new shoveled path. Clear, necessary, without flourish. You practice winter words: quiet, patience, warmth, snow, not because you need labels, but because the brush wants to move in the shape of the season. The strokes are a modest, black geometry that answers the white outside, a conversation that leaves both parties calmer. Around the room, mending keeps company with writing. A kimono cuff that wore thin in the early cold receives a small crescent of cloth in a color close enough to vanish but different enough to feel like a kindness. Boro patches, indigo squares stitched with white thread, make a quiet constellation across an old work jacket, each stitch a decision to continue rather than discard. A chipped tea bowl is bound with a thin line of lacquer and powder, gold if the crack deserves to be admired, plain if it would rather be private. Winter honors repairs. It understands that strength is a history, not a trait. Furoshiki cloths, squares for wrapping, learn their knots again because parcels travel differently when the ground is white. A book becomes a small, soft brick with a handle. A jar of pickles wears a neat diagonal fold and a secure twist. The knots look decorative by accident. They were chosen for utility. On the table, a basket holds cord and ribbon and the few spare buttons that winter makes time to find. The day's wrapping and unwrapping form a kind of proof that the village still exchanges its care. A child sits nearby and copies characters, tongue just visible, concentration absolute. The brush is smaller, the strokes a little too serious, as if gravity were heavier at that desk. A parent mends and looks over with a patience that doesn't need to say itself. Outside, the onsen sends up steady testimony that warmth continues. Inside, a kettle convinces itself toward a boil, then stops just short, as if to prevent the ink from drying too quickly. Even the house participates in the lesson. Boards give softly underfoot. The Kayabuki roof marks the hour with a small slide of snow. Shoji repaired. The room enjoys its own weather, bright but gentle. You notice how shadows behave in winter. Not sharp, not lazy. They sit near the objects that cast them, like polite guests who don't monopolize conversation. A line of brushes dries bristle down. A saucer of paste regains its skin. The repapered screen looks newly cut from light. You write a short note for a neighbor, 3 lines of good wishes, and fold it into a white triangle that fits lightly in a mittened hand. The afternoon invites other quiet repairs. A bamboo sieve loses 2 splints and gains 2 new ones, threaded through as if time could be reversed with care. A tea tin's lid receives a whisper of oil and goes back to turning like a small planet. A drawer that complained in autumn receives a pinch of wax and resolves to be agreeable. Winter's thrift is not stingy. It is affectionate. Every rescue saves more than the object. It saves the knowledge of how to rescue. Day's light leans toward evening. You gather the day's small accomplishments, a screen glowing evenly, a mended cuff, a letter ready for the sled to carry, a bowl that has decided to last another generation. Ink is decanted back into its bottle with a black glimmer, as if night itself were being politely returned. The brush is rinsed to clearness and hung, hairs pointing to tomorrow. On the veranda, the air has the taste of new snow. You press the shoji with a fingertip and feel its tightened drumskin answer. The house is thinner than a wall and thicker than a thought. Winter has taught it how to hold light. Dinner inherits the mood. Rice loosens its scent. Miso becomes round in the bowl. Pickles offer crisp, bright punctuation. The mended jacket hangs by the door, ready for morning shovel rhythm. The repaired bowl holds tea and shows its line proudly. A golden seam like a soft path through a white field. Words learned today: quiet, patience, warmth, snow, turn out to be edible. 2. You taste them in the steam and the citrus zest someone curled from an orange for dessert. Night arrives as a perfect sheet of paper. You fold it once into a room, once into a futon, once into sleep. Outside, winter writes its slow characters on roofs and paths. Inside, the house writes back in light and breath. Repairs and ink have turned the day into something whole. The shoji remains a pale moon that never sets, and behind it your sleep takes the gentle shape of the lines you traced, unhurried, intentional, warm. Winter redraws distance. 100 steps can feel like a small journey, and a lane you know in summer becomes a white canal with high, polite walls. The village answers by tuning its feet to the season. In the Gen-kan, footwear lines up like a quiet discussion. Straw waraji that remember warmer months, wooden jita raised on teeth for slush and melt, felted boots that keep their own weather. Near the door, a pair of kanjiki, bamboo snowshoes, lean like parentheses waiting to enclose the day. Their round frames and woven guts are simple, durable grammar for moving where snow would prefer you didn't. Straps cross the instep and tie with a modest knot. The first steps are shy, then sure. Kanjiki don't so much conquer snow as negotiate with it. They spread your weight into a polite suggestion, and the snow agrees to hold you up if you walk with the right patience. You learn a different cadence, shorter, softer, a rhythm that persuades rather than insists. The sound is new, too, a faint squeak, a small sigh where powder compresses and then accepts. Poles help on slopes, bamboo with a clean, pale ring when they meet hidden ice and a cork-soft landing in new drifts. The body relaxes into the method, and distance becomes friendly again. Sleds carry what legs shouldn't. A low, wooden platform with runners nearly as old as the household, a rope with winter in its weave. A crossbar polished by mittens. This is the village's second set of arms. Firewood rides without complaint. Rice sacks sit like polite passengers. Jars and pickles travel securely in a furoshiki that keeps them warm enough to remain themselves. Children sometimes ride the last stretch home, boots tucked and laughter a modest ribbon in the cold air. The runners leave bright, parallel notes on packed snow, a staff of music that the day can hum as it passes. Bridges need introductions each morning. Their steps are brushed first, the rails tested for grip, the undersides checked where icicles dream of becoming teeth. A wire line appears where the wind argues with footing. Its knots are small, courteous anchors for gloved hands. The river beneath speaks a quiet winter language, a dark middle where water keeps its purpose, pale edges where ice rehearses spring. Snow muffles the bridge's creak until the structure sounds like an old friend thinking. Even the fox pauses here and steps with care, toes arranged in neat, straight punctuation dot on steeper paths. Rope handlines cross back and forth like patient harpstrings. You learn where to place your feet, not on the shining ice, not on the soft shoulder where a collapse would smother your ankle, but on the center line tamped into a domestic firmness by the day's traffic. The village adds bamboo wands along the path like low winter reeds, not decorative, but gentle markers that keep a night walker honest. In heavy weather, a bell at the bathhouse door rings once an hour, less to measure time than to remind everyone that sound still travels. and that returning is part of going. Travel beyond the village carries winter's etiquette farther. Pack baskets are loaded with consideration rather than ambition. A kettle's lid is tied with a strip of cloth so it won't rattle against the cold. Letters ride in oiled paper envelopes tucked against warmth. Before leaving, someone pours a little hot water on the sled's runners and wipes them dry, a kindness that repays itself in half the effort on the first hill. The map of the world narrows to what the weather allows. And that narrowing proves to be a kindness. You go where you can return from. And what you bring back is precisely what the village will in the schoolyard. Children learn winter's geometry with their bodies. How to turn on packed snow without carving a trench. How to step wide on powder without sinking. How to stop laughing long enough to listen for the subtle crack that says a drift is not what it seems. Teachers call this safety. The children call it recess. A wide plank, Yukita, sometimes appears from a shed like a stored joke from last year, and older cousins show how to ride a short slope as if drawing a single brushstroke on a white page. The lesson is less about sport than about reading snow and placing your weight like a respectful sentence. Even errands become choreography. Two neighbors walk side by side where the path widens, steps falling into an easy unison that compacts the way for the next traveler. When one carries more than is comfortable, the other takes the rope without ceremony. A shovel rests at the foot of the bridge. Each crosser gives it a brief, tidying scrape, and the bridge stays brushed by many small courtesies instead of one large effort. The village moves itself the way a loom moves thread, never hurried, always exact. Homecoming is a change of sound, not just of place. Kanjuki thump snow from their frames and lean back into their parentheses. Boots surrender their chill to the Genkan, where a mat keeps winter from following further. Hands return rope to its peg. A sled runner gets its small touch of oil. The house absorbs these objects the way it absorbs people, warmer by a degree, calmer by a margin. Someone calls from the kitchen, rice in 5 breaths. The path you took will remain in the snow until night edits it softly. But the knowledge stays in your legs. How to meet the season where it stands. How to arrive without demanding, later, when the bath finds you and the quilt remembers your shape. You think of the village as a single organism moving through white. Each personal limb or hand knowing exactly where to place itself. The lanes are arteries. Bridges are careful joints. Sled tracks are tendons drawing errands home. Outside, the rope at the steep corner hums once in the wind and settles. Inside, your feet, unburdened, feel light. Distance has become small again, and tomorrow's routes have already begun to draw themselves in your sleep. Snow country has a music that prefers low volume and long notes. At first you think the world is quiet, and then you learn to hear the quiet the way you learn to read a careful hand. The morning begins with a soft thud where a Kayabuki slope releases a sheet of powder. One rounded note, neither alarmed nor loud, like a punctuation mark placed exactly where the sentence needs breath. Far off, a broom whispers across shrine steps. Nearer, a kettle adds a hush that sounds like fog deciding which way to drift. Distance compresses in winter. Sounds travel straighter and truer through cold air, so the small things can be heard and the big things behave. Fresh snow changes the grammar of footsteps. On new powder, each step offers a discrete syllable, a faint squeak that's almost a smile. On yesterday's tamped lane, the sound becomes polished, soft leather on a drum, steady and even. If the day hardens into cold, the squeak tightens into a clean, bright note, like a silk thread drawn over wood. Children learn to read this with their ears. Powder, packed, ice. A shovel's scrape adds a brushed consonant. The lift and toss a soft exhale. Two neighbors far apart can talk without raising voices, meeting midway on the breadth of the lane. Wind doesn't howl here so much as right across surfaces. You hear it reinterpret the thatch, a quick hand over a straw instrument, then move the bamboo markers into a short, rustling reply. At the garden's edge, ropes of yukatsuri hum a note you feel in your teeth if you stand very still. Barely a sound, more a suggestion that the air has lines drawn through it. Pine needles make a scale of their own, a sigh when the gust begins, a silence when it holds, a sprinkling clatter when snowlets leap free and tassel down in bright commas. Wind is not a character to fight. It is a reader, scanning the page, underlining and moving on. Water, hidden or half-hidden, keeps time. Under a bridge, the river speaks quietly in winter grammar. Vowels in the middle where liquid remembers itself, crisp consonants where ice rehearses spring along the stone. In a wooden trough behind the bathhouse, the onsen outflow murmurs against a shallow lip and breathes small steam bells that pop with the confidence of heat. Inside, kettles never boil angrily. They arrive at a softer tension and wait there, a sound like someone deciding not to interrupt. Even tea has its meter. Leaves accept water, exhale scent, and fall into a quiet arrangement at the bottom of the pot. The house carries an orchestra of kindness. Boards murmur under a familiar weight. A door slides with a respectful hush. A futon unfolds with the gentle sigh of cloth becoming landscape. Sometimes the roof speaks in syllables you can name. As powder slips. TMP as it lands along the bank. Sure as a small drift settles. In the loft, straw holds air and makes it slower, so that sounds arriving from outside pass through warmth and come out domesticated. As if the roof were translating winter into a bedtime story, birds keep counsel in winter voices. A crow writes a sentence across the morning, plain and undecorated, somehow fitting, before black dots tilt into whiteness and the lane returns to listening. Sparrows cluster in a bare hedge and sow the air with needle sounds. On crisp afternoons, you hear the thin glass chime of icicles tapping themselves alive when sun touches the eaves. A single chip breaks loose and drops, and the sound when it meets the snow is a tiny, perfect end stop. Silence resumes, but it isn't empty. It's a page saved for the next small note, tools of tones. The long thatching needle, when it's set down on a plank, offers a brief wooden kiss. Rope sliding through straw makes a purling sound, half thread, half hum. A bamboo pole used to coax snow from a ridge whispers when it moves, air parting, snow consenting, and the slide that follows is applause without hands. In kitchens, a lid lifts and clicks faintly at the edge. Rice answers with a breathy bloom. Pickles speak in a crisp syllable when chopsticks meet them. The meal composes itself as carefully as a poem, a few bright notes inside a field of warmth. Night lowers the volume by another measure. Lanterns turn sound warm. Paper screens collect it and give it back softened. Outside, the paths hold a slower conversation. A fox writes a dotted line, pauses, and edits its phrase with a flourish of tail. The bathhouse, seen and not heard, delivers its message in steam. You fill it in with the remembered cadence of water against stone. Somewhere a bell rings once, shrine or bath. It doesn't matter, and the single note seems to cross every roof. A ribbon laid along the ridgepoles, tying the houses into a gentle bundle dot on heavy snow days. The soundscape narrows deliciously. The air itself becomes thick with tiny, padded exclamations. You can hear snow landing on snow, a plush accumulation that makes the world feel close and polite. People lower their voices, as if unwilling to speak over such careful handwriting. The shovel becomes brush, the lane becomes page, and the village writes itself legible. House to bathhouse, house to storehouse, house to gate. You feel that speaking loudly would be like smudging ink before it dries. There is comfort in learning the order of these notes. Roof, broom, kettle, footstep, river, bird, bell. Once known, they become metronomes for the day. You stir miso to the beat of the eave's slow ticks. You time the last lantern check by the river's patient vowel. You listen for the roof's punctuation before bedding down. Sleep comes the way snow falls, quietly, repeatedly, with gentle confidence. The final thing you hear is not a sound but the shape of one, the house taking a small breath and holding it for you, while outside winter keeps the village in the softest music it knows. Winter in the snow country is not empty. It is full of hands remembering. Rice straw, komawara, saved from autumn fields, sleeps in tidy bundles beneath the eaves and wakes in winter to a second life. When the day is pale and the bath steam threads the lane, someone spreads a mat, sits, and loosens a bundle with a practiced twist. The scent is faintly sweet, summer stored in a light, dry breath. Fibers align under palm and thumb. The stalks grow obedient and glossy as if a comb had passed through hair. The house is suddenly a workshop of quiet purpose, and the season leans in to watch. Shimenawa ropes begin with a center, 3 cords of twisted straw that must agree to share the work. Palms roll in opposite directions, the braid tightens, and the rope fattens into a soft, protective line. The maker adds little tassels that read like blessings and small folded papers, shoulda, that winter wind will later translate into whispers. These ropes will hang across doorways and shrine gates, bright lanes of intention against the white. They are less decoration than conversation, a household telling the season, come in if you can behave. Brooms, huki, grow from the same vocabulary. Rice straw bristles are sorted by length and temperament, the springy ones eager for thresholds, the sturdy ones meant for shrine steps, the gentler fibers destined for the tatami's friendly ribs. Twine wins the belly, a binding knot hides under a neat collar, and the broom, newly born, stands bristle up to learn its posture. On the first outing, it speaks in soft syllables on wood and stone, and even the corners answer politely. The act of sweeping becomes less a chore than a line of calligraphy written on air. Footwear returns to the table as well. Zri sandals and waraji straw shoes are woven with winter patience, straw flattened, split, and threaded around toe loops that invite the foot to remember paths it has not yet taken. A heel is made, then remade a little thicker where last year's steps wore it thin. You can see summer fields in these soles, rows of gold recomposed into fruit for winter roads. A pear is hung to steam and shape by the brazier, each strand settling into the curve of the season's work. When they dry, they are firm, ready to whisper along the lane. Kanjiki, too, those round bamboo snowshoes, receive winter attention beneath warm light. Bindings frayed by last year's drifts are replaced with new straw cord that knows how to stay quiet under strain. The frame, a pale circle strong as a sentence, is checked for splinters and fed a sip of oil. A child watches, learning without being told, how to twist straw until it behaves like rope, how to pass a loop through itself so it remembers the shape of duty, how to tuck an end so it vanishes but does not forget its place. The lesson is in the fingers as much as in the eyes. In one corner, a farmer shapes rice straw barrels, tawara, that will hold grain like a promise. The weave is mathematics done by hand, over, under, pull, over, under, pull. A circumference that must be true if the winter pantry is to keep its word. A hoop of twisted straw tightens with a small creak. A wooden tool smooths the bulge into a neat waist. The finished barrel looks like a warm, sleeping animal. It will ride a sled tomorrow to the Kara, and the storehouse will approve with its measured coolness. Winter strawcraft also makes kindness portable. Soft straw rings become pot rests that spare wood from heat. Bottle wraps cushions sake on the way to a neighbor. Simple rope handles turn awkward jars into polite parcels. Furoshiki cloths do their share of carrying, but straw is a good cousin to cloth. It protects, insulates, forgives. Even the bathhouse borrows the craft. A fresh bundle by the door for brushing snow from shoulders. A braided mat where Jita can dry without sulking into the cold. Not all work belongs to adults. Children twist skinny cords while a grandmother hums a tune that knows more verses than anyone remembers. The cords become tassels that will dangle from the year's last shimenawa, add a clean line to a broom's waist, or tie the wrist of a mitten that refuses to stay home. The rhythm of the room is set by small repetitions. Twist, fold, tug, smooth. In each repetition, the house grows warmer, not by temperature but by intention. When light is thinnest, straw glows like a memory of honey. The Kayabuki roof outside wears its white crown and promises shelter. Inside, a coil of rope grows on the floor like a sleeping serpent. A row of new brooms lean like good ideas. Sandals line the wall as if they were listening. A kettle approves with a barely there murmur. Someone inspects a finished shimenawa and trims it with a careful snip. The strand falls like a golden eyelash and is saved. Because even the smallest fiber knows another USE.BY evening. Gifts of straw have scattered outward, a rope to the shrine, a broom to the steps, sandals to the genkan, new kanjiki bindings to the hook by the door, a padded bottle wrap walking down the lane inside a mitten hand. The village looks the same from a distance. White roofs, quiet steam, neat paths, but close up you can see winter's handwriting on everything. Straw writes in curves and knots, in handles and hems, in tools that feel older than they are. The field has come indoors and learned new shapes. You sleep knowing that summer is present even now, in the roof above, in the soles you place by the door, in the rope that will keep the gate's good fortune from wandering off in a storm. Winter will test these things as it tests everything. Winter is honest that way. But straw answers with calm. Bend, don't break. Bind, don't bite. Hold, then let go when the season changes its mind. Under quilts that smell faintly of sun, you can almost hear the quiet rustle, fibers remembering wind, and agreeing to become warmth. The year turns softly in snow country, as if time itself were padded with flakes. In the days before the first sunrise, a different kind of steam threads the lanes, sweet and thick, the breath of rice becoming mochi. A mortar waits like a small stone moon in the yard, its rim brushed clean of powdery snow, and the pestle stands nearby, polished by generations of hands. Someone lifts the lid from the steaming trays and the scent rises, grain-rich, warm, a promise that needs only rhythm. The rice is turned, folded, and then the pounding begins, a low, even heartbeat laid under the hush of winter. Between strikes, wet hands reach in to fold the mass, fingers moving with a confidence that comes from years of not getting burned. Neighbors drift close, their breath making pale commas in the air. The work is communal, but the music is simple. Thump, fold, thump, fold. Children watch the timing with wide eyes, learning how call and response can be made of rice and wood. When the mochi is ready, it becomes cloud-soft under palm and dusted flour. One person pinches and rounds. Another sets each piece on a wooden board that looks like it remembers every winter. A few are shaped into small New Year mirrors, kagami mochi, stacked twin moons with a bright citrus on top. Placed on the household altar where paper shivers politely in the draft.by the gate. The season writes itself in green and straw. A pair of katamatsu, pine and bamboo bound with rice rope, appears at the threshold like guests who arrived early to help. Pine offers longevity, bamboo offers straightness, straw offers the village's handwriting. Snow rests on each arrangement in a soft cap, changing nothing about their intention. When you step out to brush the path, the green looks impossibly vivid against white. A fox's neat footnotes cross beyond the wall, and the air owns the particular silence that belongs to waiting for the first bell inside. The house prepares its quieter rituals. A kettle settles into an attentive simmer over the iruri. Lacquer bowls find their best posture. The osechi dishes, cooked and cooled, arrive from the kara and the kitchen with the elegance of patience. Beans glossed like small moons. Sweet armlet layered like pale sun, burdock, and lotus roots sliced into tidy explanations of luck and where to look for it. Pickles bring the bright winter exclamation. Rice is reserved for the morning, when the first bowl will taste like beginning, and miso will make its round voice again. Night arrives with fresh snow that edits footsteps away. People fold into coats and slip along the lane for a brief hatsumt, the first shrine visit. Lanterns making small suns that move at the speed of courtesy. The steps are newly brushed. The rope is warm from the last pair of hands. The bell speaks a round note that travels the ridge lines and sits for a moment on the straw crowns before dissolving. 2 claps, a bow, and a breath that feels like a clean page. Wishes here are not grand. They are practical and dear. Strong roofs, steady paths, health in the bones, time to tend the garden ropes, steam that keeps its promises. Back home, the kotatsu glows like a low sunrise. Someone places oranges in a bowl with the care given to lanterns. Cards from far away are read aloud in a murmur that feels like tea. In a corner, the shimenawa above the household altar seems to hum with newness. Paper streamers list like white leaves that never wither. Outside, the bathhouse sends up proof that warmth continues into tomorrow. Snow falls without hurry. The house sounds different on this night, as if all the wood were tuned to a slightly brighter key. The first morning is a gentle rehearsal of the whole year, choosing slowness on purpose. The path is redrawn with a broom instead of a shovel. The brush lays an inkstroke along the lane for neighbors to follow. The The bath is taken early and lightly, a freshness rather than a deep thaw, so the day can begin in balance. In the kitchen, mochi slides into a simple soup, osni, where greens float like small promises and the broth carries the comforting, middle-of-the-world warmth. The first sip convinces the body to be patient and kind. After breakfast, someone ties a new straw tassel to the broom's waist, replacing last year's fatigue with this year's intention. The katamatsu receive a small bow. A child takes a letter to the post sled and returns with a mandarin shared in halves. A ladder leans while an elder eyes the roof's posture. Nothing needs doing today, but seeing is its own task. The river beneath the bridge keeps its winter voice and, for once, the wind seems content to read rather than edit. Afternoon makes room for games and ink. Karuta card slaps softly on tatami like the shuffle of small seasons. The calligrapher's brush chooses the year's first character with care, something unassuming and roomy, like warmth or quiet. Shoji screens glow as if they'd been polished with light. Even the corral looks pleased, its white walls accepting sun where it finds them. The village breathes with the comfort of having completed a ritual that asks nothing extravagant and returns everything steady. When evening folds back in, the Kagami mochi sits calmly on the altar. A pair of little moons that will, in their time, be broken and eaten, strength made edible. The bell at the shrine may ring once more. The roofs answer by holding the new snow with their old wisdom. Paths narrow again to the precise invitations your feet learned in the last year and will remember in the next. You go to bed under quilts aired in a clear, brave noon, fabric still holding a trace of sun, and feel the new calendar settle around you like a well-fitted futon, snug at the shoulders, roomy at the feet, exactly enough. Winter in snow country runs on a currency you can't hold in your palm for long: heat. The village saves it in many small banks, stacked wood, careful charcoal, rooms that remember warmth and spend it slowly. Out behind a corral where the wind tests corners and then loses interest, firewood rests in cords that look like tidy geology. Each split face is a patient calendar page. Each row a sentence about last spring's pruning and the autumn afternoons when sleeves were rolled and axes spoke in even syllables. Bark faces outward to shrug off snow. Ends align to keep air moving. A narrow roof or a leaning board keeps the stacks from acquiring hats too heavy for comfort. The yard holds several kinds of wood as if hosting a quiet debate. Fast-burning pine for quick persuasion, the kettle's first promise. Downy oak or chestnut for the long, low conversations of evening. Juniper, cedary and polite, for those moments when sen helps a room warm faster than degrees do. Kindling lives in baskets near the door, an invitation to begin. When the day asks for it, a handful of offcuts from roof repairs go into the basket, a pleasant circle. Straw keeps snow out. Wood keeps people warm. Offcuts keep the kettle singing. Charcoal carries a different grammar of fire, dry, compact, lasting. In the woods beyond the last terrace, a charcoal kiln, round-shouldered and earthen, sleeps under snow, its door sealed, its chimneys quiet until the work resumes. In the season, coppiced oak went and stacked like careful ribs. The door closed with mud and straw. The air allowed to speak in a small voice only. When the firing finished, the kiln exhaled a long, resigned breath, and the wood came out changed but not spent, light in the hand, clean in the burn, steady in the brazier. Bundles travel back to the village wrapped like loaves, the dust leaving fine, soft punctuation on mittens. Charcoal's virtues bloom at low volume. A hibachi accepts a few glowing pieces and then remembers how to be summer around your knees. Fish greet its clear heat without smoke. Kettles find attention without argument. In the Aruri, a bed of ash cradles charcoal as if it were an egg, held, protected, encouraged to glow from within. Ash piles are tidy, sifted daily with a wire scoop whose handle knows the shape of a wrist. The ash itself is not a remainder but a worker with second jobs. A pinch on a slick step for grip, a spoonful to polish a tarnished pot with rice bran, a sprinkle to mellow the sharpness in a pickling bed. Winter loves a material that can do more than one thing. Inside, the economy of heat is counted in habits. Doors slide closed without dawdling. Quilts are folded to keep their warmth like jars keep summer. A kettle moves from irori to brazier, not to cool but to share. Someone has learned the timing of the stove so that rice arrives just as the bath begins to think of emptying. Warmth, once made, travels through the house like a courteous guest who knows which rooms to visit in which order. The Kayabuki above, thick with its layered straw, keeps the conversation private, heat rising, slowing, settling. You can hear it sometimes, the sound of a house holding on. The woods that supply these comforts are not distant, exactly. They are neighbors, Sadayama, a landscape tutored by hands. Trees that were cut last time are sprouting this time. Copper stools ringed with snow show a tidy halo where shoots will rise again. Winter walks there are not just strolls. They are check-ins, which stand waits for spring. Which path needs branches gathered? Which fallen limb will become a season of kettles and 2 extra degrees at the kotatsu? The forest wears its obligations calmly. A ribbon on a trunk marks next year's work. A pile of brush waits to be bundled into the kindling that will make morning easier. Wood brings with it a cadence that winter understands. A wedge sets, a mallet persuades, a log splits with a deep, satisfying note that feels like work acknowledging itself. The pieces are ferried on a sled, runners speaking that clean, quiet song over the lane. At the threshold, snow acknowledges defeat and brushes itself off. The wood goes in, a piece at a time, each with its future heat folded inside. Children count the stack not by number but by rituals. Enough for tonight, enough for a snow day. Enough for when Auntie visits. The ledger stays in memory because the body keeps its own accounts. Even smoke learns manners in winter. Chimneys test the air, find its patience, and offer a thin, vertical line that vanishes without smudging the sky. On certain afternoons, a faint sweetness from the sake brewery mingles with a cedar hint from someone's stove. The village smells like a story about grain and wood traveling toward warmth. At dusk, the number of little smokes tells you who is home and who is still finishing their errands. The bathhouse plume is a reassuring paragraph at the end of the lane, proof that heat exists in abundance somewhere and can be borrowed by tired bones. Tools do their season alongside their people. The axe head is lick with oil and sleeps in a cloth. The splitting maul leans where the eaves do not drip. A wooden trug, repaired with 2 short lengths of copper wire, carries ash out and kindling in. Tongs clack softly to settle charcoal. A fan of woven bamboo gives 1 thin breath to coax a glow and then returns to stillness. Nothing shouts, because shouting wastes heat. A tea table, the dividend arrives. Rice lifts its lid with that familiar, breathy exhale. Miso's round voice rises. Tofu anchors the soup. Pickles add their bright winter punctuation. A kettle refills cups without cooling the room. The hibachi keeps ankles from remembering the lane too vividly. Warmth has changed forms several times today. Living wood to split wood, wood to charcoal, charcoal to red thought to steam and soup and speech, and it all feels like a single. Coherent kindness. Before sleep, someone tidies the ash bed, sifts the day's grey into its clay jar, and sets 3 small pieces of tomorrow's charcoal where they will remember to catch at the first suggestion of flame. The stacks outside shine briefly under moonlight like shelves of small winters waiting to be turned into small summers. The roof gives its low syllable as a sheet of snow lets go and lands in the bank that has been expecting it all week. You slide under quilts that hold the day's arithmetic of heat. The house breathes once, slow and full, and the village turns its quiet currency into dreams. Some days arrive already wrapped. Before the first bowl of rice finishes its small, fragrant speech, the sky has turned utterly to cloth, grey upon grey, and the first broad flakes come down like polite visitors who intend to stay. Storm day is not an interruption. It is a different meter. The village shortens its gestures and lengthens its patience. Doors receive their winter punctuation. Amadu, wooden storm shutters, slide along their tracks with a low, even hush, turning paper windows into wooden thoughts. Light does not vanish, it warms. Rooms take on lamp tone, and sound grows soft-footed, as if the house had put on thick socks outside. Boundaries are rewritten in white. Snow fences, yukigakoi, stand where gardens meet lanes, lattices of bamboo and slatted with it break the wind into harmless syllables. Their pattern makes a quiet mathematics along the path, catching drift and laying it down before it can misbehave. Pines lean comfortably behind them, rope slung and steady. Shrubs huddle in reed coats. The veranda's edge wears a removable skirt of slats that spares the siding from winter's enthusiasm. Everything, even the fences, looks handmade and reasonable, like arguments that have already been settled. The roof listens and replies. Kayabuki slopes accept weight with the calm of beasts accustomed to burden, then release it on their own schedule, soft sheets slipping in a practice cadence. Where the angle holds a stubborn load, a bamboo pole waits by the gate with a patience equal to the weather's. A tap here, a coax there, and the snow decides to become bank instead of roof. The fall lands without surprise. The bank, already expecting company, receives it. Beneath the eaves, drip edges and troughs guide meltwater away from thresholds. Every channel mapped in autumn and now attending to its winter job. Storm day paths are drawn narrower and nearer. The big shovel sleeps. The small one works, trim, tidy, careful at the doorstep, careful at the pump, careful along the spool of lane between house and bath. The world shrinks to needed distances, kitchen to corral, hearth to woodpile, futon to kettle. Between passes, the shovel rests with its blade turned outward like a little boat beached between tides. You learn to do everything a little earlier and a little slower, as if time itself were heavy and needed lifting by two sets of hands. Indoors, a martyr changed the acoustics. Wind no longer drafts through paper. It hums at wood, and wood answers with a low, content vowel. A brazier's glow becomes both heat and light. The aurora turns thoughtful, its embers a red grammar that unknots the room's shoulders. Shoji stand behind their armored cousins like lanterns behind shutters, and you can feel their softness even unseen. Hands find their storm's day chores without being told. Threads gathered, cuffs mended, a sieve retied. Labels brushed onto jars whose contents will be eaten when the sky grows friendly again. Tea garden edges. Fences develop white shoulders and then white arms, until each ladder square holds a small pillow. Once in a while, someone brushes the weight back down to the ground as if stroking a sleeping animal. The yukatsuri ropes on the pines ring faintly when a gust changes its mind, more felt than heard. Lantern caps become improbable hats, then taller hats, then little towers kept polite by a caretaker's quick touch with a broom. Storms here do not demand defiance. They request company, and the village obliges by tending edges. The bathhouse door, half hidden in a soft canyon, glows like a promise that still honors its appointments. Storm etiquette shortens the soak, warmth enough to convince the bones, not so long that the path returns to doubt. You dry in a room that holds heat like a phrase held in the mouth. You step into boots that remember your ankles. You follow your own newly made thread back through the soft-walled corridor. Behind you, the bath exhales a steady sentence of steam that the storm edits into a cleaner, brighter-lined kitchens become embassies of ordinary comfort. Rice, miso, tofu, pickles, a treaty signed in bowls that steam in unison. A pot of barley tea learns to live on the hibachi and stay just shy of boiling for hours, as if practicing patience were its profession. Someone slices daikon with the exact rhythm of snow sliding from an eave. Another checks the corral ledger. How many jars opened this week? How much charcoal left near the door? Then closes the book with the assurance that tomorrow will also be enough. Children are allowed a geography of windows. A circle cleared on the glass with a warm palm becomes a private observatory. Fox tracks appear, vanish, reappear. A neighbor's red cap passes, the only firm color in a world of good whites. A lantern bobs like a comma. Later, a paper kite, too windy to fly, becomes a shadow puppet at the shoji, and the storm becomes an audience delighted by silence. The day seems long and then seems short, the way a peaceful paragraph can be both. Afternoon puts a hand on the village and says half speed. Errands are rewritten. What could be combined is combined. What can wait does. Sled tracks a few and deepen quickly into soft translation. Letters ride tomorrow's runners. The shrine bell, rung once, sounds rounder than usual, as if snow had polished the note. From the forest edge, A single tree gives a muffled crack, a branch deciding to be gentle and lie down. Someone will find it after the weather and thank it with a saw. Evening draws the armada shut everywhere that forgot, and lamps finish the day's color, a warm, edible gold. Outside, fences keep their patient vigil, roofs make their low punctuation, and banks grow up to meet the eaves as if the village was slowly nesting itself. Inside, quilts unfold like pages, futons remember backs, and the brazier becomes a quiet moon. The storm is not outside anymore. It is the room you sleep in, padded, deliberate, kind. You fall asleep to a roof's soft thump and wake, sometime later, to the same sound, a comma between two sleeps, while winter continues to write its long, courteous letter around the house. Morning gathers the small travellers. Backpacks settle squarely between shoulders. Scarves remember how to be bridges between breath and air. The lane is a narrow ribbon drawn fresh, and the village edits its own footprints to make room for shorter strides. Children walk in pairs where the path widens, their steps falling into a neat duet that compacts the snow just enough for the next pair. At the bridge, a mittened hand taps the rail, more greeting than test, and the dark river answers with its steady winter vowel. School is not far, nothing is far in snow country, but winter stretches distance into a story that takes exactly the right amount of time to tell. The schoolyard is a clean white table, already ruled by early tracks, straight lines to the door, looping commas where someone discovered powder deeper than boots. A broom has drawn rectangles around the stoop like careful margins. By the entry, a rack waits for hats and coats to steam themselves modestly back toward usefulness. Kanjiki lean in parentheses near the door, not often used but always ready to enclose a day that asks. There's a small ceremony here. Boots placed neatly, indoor shoes chosen with a soft thump. A bow to the room that will hold your attention warm and steady until noon, inside. A kerosene stove keeps its red, round thought in the center aisle. On top sits a kettle that never quite boils. Its job is humidity, not tea, and a netted ring holds a few tangerines that will, by recess, become easy to peel. The room has winter acoustics, paper windows that glow, wooden floors that remember footsteps, desks that make a single polite sound when chairs are tucked. The teacher speaks in a register that keeps voices from fogging the air. The children answer in a chorus that sounds like mittens learning to write. Breath becomes part of the lesson, long, even, attentive. First period is handwriting, black ink on clean paper, the brush held like a quiet promise. Characters arrive in winter shapes, straight and spare, strokes landing as decisively as feet on a tamp lane. The teacher's model is less instruction than pace, not too fast. Let the white of the page do its share of the work. Outside the shoji, a flurry rehearses and changes its mind. Inside, a small stove tick marks time, and the kettle contributes a near silent encouragement. When the brush lifts from the last stroke, the character sits like a lantern in snow, complete without needing to be elaborate. Between lessons, the room practices warmth as etiquette. A line forms at the stove to turn, palms outward, then returns to desks without claiming more than a fair share of glow. The kettle gives the tangerines their secret, softening skin just enough, and the teacher splits one to pass down a row, sent spritzing into the air like a brief, bright footnote. A window opens a hand's width and closes again, trading a breath of cold for a clearer room. Winter teachers sharing better than any poster. The stove is everyone's, the quiet is everyone's, the day moves because everyone lifts a little, recess is its own subject. The yard transforms from blank page to diagram, small hills becoming launch pads, a plank yukita sliding one elegant line at a time, a rope handline at the playmound helping small boots find their confidence. Games pivot to winter rules, no running that digs trenches. Wide steps where powder waits to swallow a knee. A lookout posted at the drift by the fence to warn of collapsing edges. Laughter is softened by scarves. When a fox trail is found near the far corner, it is admired, not followed. The class returns inside glowing with the kind of heat that never troubles the stove. After arithmetic, numbers written as neat as fences, comes an exercise in village literacy. A map of the lanes traced from memory. Who keeps the path from the kara to the bathhouse? Where is the rope across the steep corner? Which bridge needs brushing twice on storm days? Pencils draw networks that look like straw ropes or garden ukatsuri, lines connecting responsibility to place. The chalkboard fills with roots, and the room experiences a small, satisfied hush. As if the village itself had entered and nodded approval, lunch is eaten as if warming the body were part of the curriculum, and it is. Bowls appear from tidy cloth bundles, rice steams, miso makes its round voice, pickles offer their bright punctuation. A rotation of hands tends the stove, a rotation of hands opens a window, a rotation of hands checks the mittens drying by the entry. The teacher says little. The habits say enough. Outside, the bathhouse plume writes a vertical sentence that reaches exactly to the underside of the clouds and then stops politely. Afternoon lessons lean toward the tactile. Bamboo splints are threaded into a simple weave. A cracked sieve is retied. A short rope is twisted from straw that smells faintly of summer. The point is not the object but the continuity, hands learning the motions that make a place endure. A story is told while thumbs press knots into remembering. A winter when the path tunneled and the bell at the shrine was found by sound alone. A roof renewed just in time. The year the river carried ice like plates, clicking politely as it went. The stove approves with a single, soft expansion tick. When it is time to go, the room conducts its evening ritual. Desks align. Brushes are rinsed and dried bristle down. The stove is thanked with a careful turn of its dial. Outdoor layers resume their posts. Mittens remember which hands are theirs. The first few steps into the yard feel cold only until the village takes over. Lanterns already practicing dusk behind shoji. Lanes that your legs can navigate without thinking. A path that has been kept by neighbors who will use it after you. The bridge receives the day's last parade of small boots, and the river returns each step with a low, approving vowel. Home is a re-entry of warmth. The gen-kan collects snow from hems. A kettle elsewhere makes the same not quite boil that kept the classroom kind. A kotatsu offers the degree of heat the stove left behind. Books and brushes are set near but not on the quilt. There is wisdom in knowing which objects sleep where. Later, a worksheet appears with 3 questions about the village map, and answers are found between spoonfuls of soup and the sound of snow negotiating with the eaves. Bedtime comes at its ordinary time, which winter loves. Outside, the schoolhouse lamp goes out. Inside, the day's characters turn into dreams. Beneath the white grammar of winter, water keeps riding. You can hear it if you stand very still at the foot of the lane where 2 houses lean toward each other like old friends. Somewhere under the packed path, a narrow runnel moves with patient intention. Too small to be river, too steady to be melt. It is the village's backstage, a string of channels coaxed from springs and guided by hands, carrying what must move even when the world prefers to hold its breath. Winter approves of this kind of discretion. Above, the Kayabuki holds snow like a folded quilt. Below, water goes about its business without asking for applause. The Yukamura, snow store, lives at this intersection of patience and flow. It looks like a small barn married to a drift, thick walls of tamped snow and straw, a roof that learns shade, a wooden door that opens onto a cold that is not hostile but curated. Inside, crates of vegetables drowse as if convinced of spring by reasoning rather than weather. Cabbage heads nap in straw collars. Daikon stack like ivory logs. Apples keep a quiet perfume that the room politely refuses to spread. The temperature is an agreement. Winter lends its cool. The house lends its order. The runnel nearby whispers just enough to keep damp from thinking it has been invited. Each removal is written in a pencil ledger. 2 cabbages, for daikon, a small basket of apples for the school stove day. Nothing is hoarded. Everything is kept a little farther down. Behind the bathhouse, the channel widens enough to show itself. The water is not hot. Onsen outflow travels separately, but it borrows a degree of gentleness from the world's subterranean logic and seldom freezes in one piece. Wooden slats make a lid where footsteps cross. Between them, steam sometimes rises in the language of invisibles meeting air. The sound is precise and narrow, a silver thread on the day's cloth. A ladle hangs from a nail for the practical miracle of clear water on a storm day, for rinsing hands. For waking a broom's bristles, for reminding the garden basin to keep an eye open, old habit remembers a mill. Even if this village's wheel is resting for the season. Where the runnel bends, there is a widening like a memory of movement, a lip of stone smoothed by past work. In other winters, when saws asked less and rice was hold near home, the wheel turned very slowly under a cap of frost, a long, deliberate heartbeat you could feel through the plank. The wheel is still now, a dark sun with frozen spokes, and the quiet seems perfectly right. Work in winter chooses its scale. The big motions wait for spring. The small ones continue and carry everyone gently forward, along house walls, wooden gutters, themselves a kind of polite instrument, conduct melt exactly where it should go. They accept the roof's soft drum beats, turn them into a ribbon, and send them down to the channel rather than the threshold. At corners, rope wicks hang like tassels, guiding drips to the right thoughts. If a day grows too generous with sun, someone props a tile at the gutter mouth to change the sentence's punctuation from comma to period. Nothing dramatic happens. Everything remains correct. By evening, the improvised edit is removed, because winter is good at fixing its own grammar overnight. The bathhouse keeps its separate hydrology. Hot water arrives from a source beneath the hill, writes steam into the rafters, then retires through a hidden path that never contradicts the cold channel's purpose. Where the two conversations pass each other unseen, a small moss stays bright, a single green comma in a paragraph of white. No one points. Everyone knows. The world beneath the lane contains shared courtesies that make the visible village tidy. Kitchen doors open briefly to trade warmth for clarity. A pot is tipped clean with water that feels honest on the wrists. A colander steams and then behaves. A wooden tub receives a rinse that leaves it smelling faintly of river stone. The Yukamuro sends up a crate, and the runnel receives the ice that hugged the apples. A child is shown the vapor trail of breath and the steadier thread of water. The difference becomes a lesson that needs no vocabulary test. Winter turns domestic things into demonstrations, and the demonstrations stay learned to the garden's edge. A Tsukubai basin is ringed by a thin, solemn lace of ice. Someone uses the ladle to clear a small eye, and for a moment the water's face looks back smooth and dark, like lacquered ink. In that small mirror you can see the ropes of the Yukatsuri above, the white felt of the stone lantern's cap, and a piece of sky that the storm forgot to claim. You pour the water back gently, and the sound resets the room, the entire house, in fact, to a calmer meter. Inside, a kettle answers with a soft, approving lift of its lid late afternoon. The channels speak more distinctly, as if the day's uses had taught them the right volume. The shop's back step rinses away 2 crescent moons of soy sauce. The Kara's threshold forgets 3 footprints. The sled runners wash their thin song and are lean to dry. The water's route through the village looks like a diagram of courtesy. It attends to kitchens, sheds, bathhouse, gardens, then returns to the mainstream with no complaint and no waste. Where snowmelt joins, it steps down in neat terraces, so even gravity behaves with table manners. By dusk, the lids go back on. Wooden covers, straw mats, small bridges whose undersides stay mostly dry. The channels keep moving, but they prefer to do it in the company of lamp glow and footsteps becoming rarer. The Yukamuro closes to its disciplined cool. The ledger pencil sleeps. If the wind lifts, you can hear a soft rattle on slats, water making its tiny applause for the day's clean completions. Above, the roofs continue their punctuation. Thump, hush, hush. Below, the village writes in cursive. Before sleep, you step out once and listen. It sounds like the house is thinking, kettle low, bath satisfied, roof breathing, and the ground is thinking, too, in a different register. Narrow vowels of water, brief consonants where it meets stone. You realize that warmth and flow are partners here, not rivals. Heat loosens the body. Water carries the day. Snow keeps the books. Roofs sign the page. You go in, shut the door with a gentle thought, and the channel continues on, agreeing silently to keep everyone escorted through the long, beautiful white.